In this episode of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the new backup netminder for the Washington Capitals. Yes, Darcy Kuemper kind of stole all of the headlines when he signed that new deal on free agency with the Washington Capitals. But in this episode, let's get to know Charlie Lindgren next on Locked On Capitals.
Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, and I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available on video form, so head on over to YouTube and check that out. And when you're on YouTube, make sure and hit that subscribe button. And if you like the videos, hit the thumbs up button. That really helps grow the channel. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in this edition, we are going to talk about the new goalie for the Capitals. No, not Darcy Kuemper in this episode. We are going to talk about the new backup netminder for Mr. Kuemper, Charlie Lindgren. Like we talked about that, the headlines of free agency were Darcy Kuemper, the biggest name goalie on the free agent market, signed a deal with the Capitals. It was speculated for quite some time, but it came to fruition on the day of free agency. And I really look forward to what this Capitals team looks like next year under the tandem of Kuemper and Lindgren. I think that it has to be much improved over last year with the Samsonov and Vanacek tandem. Inconsistency was the theme of the games. So in this episode, that's what we're talking about. Charlie Lindgren primarily played in the AHL last season. He did get his brief stint on the Blues last season. In 34 regular season appearances for Springfield last season, Lindgren posted a 24-7-1 record, which included 3 shutouts during the postseason. Meanwhile, the 28-year-old was 5-3-0-1 with a 2.79 GAA. So not too bad for a netminder, to finally get his big break. He's, one of these guys that you talk about that kind of toils in the AHL for years. And so it's good to see that he finally got his opportunity. In this article, they talk about when the Thunderbirds return to the ice this fall, though, it will be with a different pair of goalies between the pipes. According to Senior Vice President and General Manager Brian MacLellan, the Caps signed Lindgren to a 3-year, $3.3 million contract on Wednesday. And that was a good showing of faith by Mac to say, not only am I in on you, I'm signing you to the big team. I'm signing you to a 3-year deal, and you are going to become a millionaire in the process. So, this isn't just a netminder that they just kind of threw at the wall to see if he would stick. There was some vetting that went on here. Obviously, they wanted to go out and get the big fish. In that example was Darcy Kuemper, but they weren't satisfied there. There was many people around the Capitals organization that said, why didn't they just go with Samsonov as the backup? Well, Samsonov ended up signing a deal with the Maple Leafs for over $1 million. But ultimately, an unproven commodity. We've seen what we have in Samsonov. I know it's a little bit hard to swallow with, Samsonov moving on from the Caps. He was a high draft pick. And generally speaking, in sports, they don't like to move on from their top draft picks unless there's reason for it. And I ultimately think there was reason for it. We gave Samsonov his opportunity. We gave Vanacek his opportunity. And now they have their opportunity to flourish on the Maple Leafs and Mr. Vanacek for the New Jersey Devils. But in this episode, we are talking about Lindgren and where he stands. And I think that, the arrow's really pointing up for this Capitals team. If you look at net minding in particular, the Capitals moved on from their original goaltending tandem in Vitek Vanacek and Ilya Samsonov earlier this season. Since then, Washington has wasted little time filling those roles, signing Darcy Kuemper to a 5-year, $26.25 million contract on Wednesday to become its official starter. So just some big news for the Capitals signing him. And, this is one of the things I was thinking about, is that Darcy Kuemper will be the goalie of record through the remainder of Alex Ovechkin's career. That's a bit of a sobering thought, a little bit of a sad thought, I guess you could say, is that 5 years from now, there's a pretty good chance that Alex Ovechkin will have hung up the skates or will be his final season. So this was a real testament by Brian MacLellan to say, I know approximately how much time we have with Alex left on this team. I want to solidify that net minding position. I want to plug the holes around the roster to make sure that we are in a good position to win. And I think that Brian MacLellan did that by signing Kuemper and Lindgren, and just to really right that ship that's been wrong, since Braden Holtby has left the team. There was, for the longest time, netminding was the strong suit of this Capitals team. But as of recently, the last 2 years in particular, Vanacek and Samsonov have been inconsistent. And I know that the script has changed a bit because Henrik Lundqvist was slated to be the starter. That was the big news. Henrik Lundqvist, who was the big brick wall in New York for so many years, as the Capitals faced the Rangers in the playoffs, had that heart condition and moved on. So it kind of put the Capitals in an odd position to what's next in net. They had Ilya Samsonov, who was a budding star, and Vitek Vanacek. Let's face it, he wasn't ever really slated to be on the big team. Many people said that Vitek Vanacek was a starter in Hershey at best. But, the season that Samsonov was inconsistent and missed some time, Vanacek was the one that rose to the challenge and he kind of, gave some consistency, that not this last season, but the season before. But, they tried to go in and go all in on him this past season, and it just didn't work. And I'm glad that the Capitals ultimately moved on from that tandem. I think that, the Capitals did their due diligence. They did what they could do, and then they moved on. And, I was a bit worried that Brian MacLellan was going to do nothing about it because he did nothing about it last season. And I kind of roasted him over that. But, I've given credit where credit's due. He went out and he swung for the fences and got Darcy Kuemper. He got Charlie Lindgren. So on paper, it appears that he fixed this situation in net. And I really hope that, sometimes when you draft things out with a piece of paper or you script it out, you're like, that seems to work just fine. Will it ultimately work? I guess it remains to be seen. There has been some issues with Darcy Kuemper's health, most notably his eyes. If you remember last season, when he was going to the playoffs, he missed a couple games there. I'm not sure the exact extent of his eye injury, but he had to, what they said, retrain his eyes. So there are some question marks there, and there are some question marks in Charlie Lindgren, who is ultimately an unproven commodity. Yes, he's played well in the AHL and in his brief stints in the NHL, but is that going to translate to a year-long win with that tandem? I guess it remains to be seen. I'm going to choose to have an optimistic outlook on this team because I think that, anything at this point is going to be an improvement over what the Capitals had this last season. And I think that things are looking good for the Capitals as we start this next season. And I'm looking forward to next season. All right, so after this break here, we are going to continue to talk about the netminding tandem, primarily about Charlie Lindgren. We'll talk about him, but first, from the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You've probably tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given coconut brownie chunk the Puffs treatment. That's right, the coconut brownie chunk Built flavor you love in a deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling and listen. They are good for you. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and all delicious. And let me tell you something. I had a box of these sent to my house. I loved them. My wife loved them. My kids loved them. We were all fighting on who could eat the rest of them. The kids won ultimately. Coconut brownie chunk puffs are only here for a limited time. Go to Built.com now to make sure you don't miss out. They're going fast because they taste amazing. All Built bars are made with a collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of healthy benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. There's so much junk out there. This is not a candy bar. Even though it kind of tastes like one, it's all delicious and good for you. The best part about Built Puffs is, of course, they taste amazing, but you can enjoy them guilt-free because they are actually good for you. They are the perfect treat, perfect if you've got a craving, you need to satisfy your sweet tooth, or if you need a healthy snack. They are an excellent source of protein, delicious coconut, rich sweet brownie, creamy marshmallow. Stop fantasizing. Get to Built.com to order your box of coconut brownie chunk puffs right now. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, welcome back to this edition of Locked On Capitals as we talk about the new net-minding tandem on the Washington Capitals. In this episode, though, primarily concentrating on Charlie Lindgren and what he brings to this team. And let's kind of go back to the origin story. Who is Charlie Lindgren? So the scouting report on him is he owns a decent frame, 6'1", and a solid fundamentals for the goaltending position. Also, he catches with his right hand, which can often deceive NHL shooters, needs to add bulk and fill out his big frame, also needs to learn the intricacies of the goaltending position for the professional ranks in order to maximize output, but his long-range potential, solid goaltender with some upside, and I think he has shown some upside, as he's kind of worked his way up through the ranks. And now this is his opportunity on the Capitals. This is his opportunity on the big team to really shine. For St. Louis last year, in 5 games played, he was 5-0. But where he really stood out was with the Thunderbirds last season. In 34 games played, he was 24-7. And, just a really solid netminder. He started, back in the 09-10 season and kind of worked his way up through the college ranks, through the junior leagues, and finally found his way on the Montreal Canadiens. He then moved on to the Blues organization, and now he is with the Washington Capitals. But just looking over his record historically, he has been a solid netminder. If you take a look at him, this is his college days in 14-15 at St. Cloud State. In 38 games played, 19-18. On the 15-16 season in 40 games, he was 30-9. So just a really solid player. Lindgren began his junior career with the Sioux Falls Stampede. Lindgren played his college hockey at St. Cloud State University from 13-14 to 15-16. On March 30th, 16, Lindgren decided to forego his senior year at St. Cloud State and signed as a free agent by the Montreal Canadiens to a 2-year, 2-way contract. At the tail end of the 15-16 season, Lindgren played his first NHL game on April 7th, 16. The Canadiens won 4-2 against the Carolina Hurricanes. On November 5th, 2017, Lindgren won his first career NHL shutout against the Blackhawks with a 2-0 win, which he made 38 saves. He was the starting goalie of the game since Carey Price was out with injury. On February 13th, 2018, the Canadiens signed Lindgren to a 3-year, $2.25 million contract. So Lindgren is no stranger to playing in the NHL. He did play some time with the Blues, of course, and he played with the Montreal Canadiens. On July 29th, 2021, the St. Louis Blues signed Lindgren as a free agent to a 1-year, 2-way contract. He was assigned to the AHL Springfield Thunderbirds to begin the 21-22 season. He was later recalled and made his debut for the Blues on December 7th, 2021, when Blues goaltender Husso was injured late in the third period in a game against the Panthers. Entering the score tied at 3-3, Lindgren was credited with the win, having played 6 minutes and faced 3 Panther shots before the Blues won in overtime 4-3. On July 13th, 2022, Lindgren was signed as a free agent, as we know, to the Washington Capitals, and the rest is history, as they say. So, just some time for Lindgren to go out and prove himself. That is the book on him. He has had some stints in the NHL with the Canadiens and with the Blues, but now it's his time to really earn his spot as the backup netminder for the Washington Capitals, because there are some netminders in AHL Hershey that are going to be nipping at his heels. You got to think that this fall it's going to be a battle in the training camp with Zach Fucale and Charlie Lindgren. I think that, Charlie Lindgren is the netminder that they signed, but I don't think that the Capitals would be opposed if for some reason Fucale rose to the challenge and he ended up being the backup. I don't think that's too probable, but I have seen things like that happen before. I think that at the end of the day, what the Capitals want is they want a consistent netminder that can make the saves when called upon. We know that Darcy Kuemper is going to be carrying a bulk of the mail this next season, but what the Capitals want is a backup goalie to step up and fill in admirably. And I think that, Charlie is poised to do that. But like I talk about this fall, I think it's going to be interesting. I will say that Zach Fucale will probably really give him a run for his money. And then also in the wings, you have Hunter Shepard as well. I think that Hunter Shepard is probably, a couple years away. And then in the pipeline, you also have Clay Stevenson. So, I mean, this Capitals team is stacked in the net minding department for years to come. And I think that, ultimately it's going to be Darcy Kuemper and Charlie Lindgren. But like I say, who knows how it's going to end up being? We don't ultimately know where it's going to go. I think that, Zach Fucale, who played pretty well, admirably, kind of in a lot of ways similar to a Charlie Lindgren trajectory, if you look at it, because last season, Fucale had those 3 consecutive shutouts, and then when he was called upon by the Capitals, he played well. You could make an argument that the Capitals could have saved some money by promoting Fucale to the big team. I'm not really quite sure what they were thinking there, but I think that, historically, I think that the track record for Lindgren is a little bit better. But in any case, I think the Capitals are stacked for years to come in the netminding department. And I think that, it's going to be one of their times to shine. All right. So after the break here, we are going to continue to talk about Charlie Lindgren. But first, which NFL star moves the betting line the most? Starting July 18th, Locked On gives you the 50 most valuable players in the NFL from the odds makers at BetOnline. Available July 18th on Locked On NFL, wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. All right, welcome back to this edition of Locked On Capitals. My name is Dan Holman. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Cap. So in this edition, we are talking about the new backup netminder for the Washington Capitals, Charlie Lindgren. And I am truly optimistic about his future with this team. He had an excellent season with the Thunderbirds last season, and his brief stint with the Blues, he played well. So, like I say, it's going to be Darcy Kuemper carrying a bulk of the mail for the Caps in net, save, some sort of injury or something like that. I think that is what's going to be the case. Is Lindgren will play, a fraction of the games, of course, but there's so many intangibles and there's so many outliers. How do we know what's going to happen in this season? Is it possible that Kuemper could get injured? Is it possible that Lindgren could get injured? One of the things we learned last season from watching the playoffs is not only do you have to have a solid number 1, a solid number 2, but a solid number 3 goalie. If you take a look at the Pittsburgh Penguins, they had to call upon Louis Domingue as they went into the playoffs. I don't think that went really according to the script for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So tying this back to the Capitals, I think that the Capitals are lucky in the regard that they have a number 1 in Kuemper and a number 2 in the form of Charlie Lindgren, and I guess you could say a 2A in the form of Zach Fucale. So if there is injury in the ranks of the netminding department, I think that the Capitals are covered. Taking a look at Charlie Lindgren, a butterfly goaltender who reads the play well and does an excellent job staying square to the puck. Charlie Lindgren has a nice combination of size and agility as he is quick on his skates to get into position and plays the angles well. The right catching goalie recovers quickly and never gives up on a shot, has a very good glove and doesn't allow many second chances as he controls rebounds well. He battles for the puck, makes timely saves, and has the ability to give his team a confidence boost. That is from 2017. So, kind of rewinding the clock. But, sometimes when you look at this, I think that it's helpful to kind of learn about the history of these players. It's not always just what happened last year, but over the history, how does this goaltender or how does this player play? And, I think that the record kind of speaks for itself. I think that he is poised to do a really good job for this Capitals team. And I think that the one thing that benefits the Capitals so much is the fact that, they are stocked in net. The role of backup goalie with the Canadiens may be Lindgren's to lose heading into next season, but there was reason to believe it was his to lose over the last 2 seasons. Before the Canadiens thought having Antti Niemi and Kincaid as a backup stopgaps were good ideas. This is going back and talking about his time with the Canadiens. If Primo shows enough to immediately jump to backup goaltender status in Montreal, that could leave him as an AHL starter. Even here, it's entirely possible that Lindgren might have to share the net with McNevin. So this is a guy that has worked his way up through the ranks. Even when he was playing on the Canadiens, he played solid, but he had to really prove himself. And this is an article in SB Nation as they talk about Charlie Lindgren and his history with the Montreal Canadiens. But, having a netminder or having a player have to prove themselves is not necessarily a bad thing. I actually think it's a good thing. Sometimes when you just give a position to someone, I think that, it's the tendency is, sometimes to kind of take it for granted. I was just given this and it's my job to take. But if you look at him, if you look at Charlie Lindgren, he had to fight his way to get his jobs that he got. And that speaks well of his character and what his coaches thought of him, what his GMs thought of him, is that, he was a guy that was willing to do what it took. If that meant that he was going to have to spend some time in the AHL to prove himself, he did it. He did it last season for the Thunderbirds and played well. So I think that if there is a player out there that has earned his right to play on the big NHL team, it's Charlie Lindgren, and he's going to get that opportunity in the fall. And it's going to be interesting to see how this tandem does, because it's been quite some time since this Capitals team has, totally cut bait and cut ties with both of their netminders and infused 2 goalies. So it is going to be most interesting to see how Stanley Cup winner Darcy Kuemper does with Charlie Lindgren as his backup. There's been so many great additions that this Capitals team has made with Connor Brown and Borgstrom and, just so many great players that have come to fill in these roles on this team. Any hole that was on the lineup, MacLellan went and plugged it. So, at the end of the day, what remains to be seen is if it gels on ice. If the script is as good as actuality, I think that things are looking good for this Capitals team. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On Experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the world of hockey. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. So in this episode, that's what we talked about, Charlie Lindgren. What my takeaway from this is a big improvement over last season. And I think what the big key that you're going to notice on this team is consistency in net over the Vanacek-Samsonov tandem. So I think that everyone out there that's listening to this podcast should have reason to feel optimistic about this Capitals team in the fall. Once again, thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, and I'll talk to you next time.